When his car was against the wall, you could clearly see the rocks and marbles from the pothole in his front left tire. That is just inadmissible for Formula 1, the biggest motorsport spectacle in the world in its most prestigious race. Inadmissible. Monaco is history, glamour, and the place where qualifying matters the most, and that will heavily impact the driver ratings for the 2026 Monaco Grand Prix. Without further ado, let's go! Great qualifying lap from Verstappen, barely missing out on pole, and to be honest, it might have been for the better, because the heartbreak would have been even bigger for his fans. His car suffered an engine problem right at the start, and he couldn't even make it into turn 1 while actually racing. So I'm not rating his weekend. The second DNF of the race was Valtteri Bottas, who retired on lap 15 due to brake issues. We all know Monaco, you need a good qualifying, and it's true that in a Cadillac, even a good qualifying probably won't get you out of Q1 unless plenty of other drivers mess up their laps. Still, Bottas was almost 5/10 of his teammate, which is unacceptable. I'll give him a 4. Oliver Bearman had a poor qualifying. Haas always seems to be slower in qualifying than in the race, and that's especially dangerous around Monaco. Still, he was out-qualified by even Pérez, which ain't a good sign, but his lap was pretty similar to Ocon's, so perhaps that was just the pace they had during quali. In the race, he broke his front wing against his teammate, forcing him to stop early, because having no front wing around Monaco is just a no-go, and eventually they ended up retiring while he was running at the back, with no chance of really doing anything. He gets a 4. Lando Norris was about a 10.5 slower than Piastri during qualifying in a weekend where McLaren were clearly the slowest team amongst the top 4. Had to avoid Verstappen at the start of the race, which made him lose a position to his teammate Piastri, and then lost another one to Gasly, which meant he stayed behind Gasly until he retired. Second weekend in a row he retires, I'm giving him a 6. At the last turn during lap 60, Lance Stroll crashed against the barriers. It was a pretty uneventful race for Aston Martin until that point, not enough pace on either qualifying or during the race, but Lance Stroll crashing brought out the safety car. The thing is, it wasn't a conventional Lance made a mistake and crash moment. One of the reasons, apart from the awful brakes Aston Martin has, was the fact there was a fucking pothole on the outside of the turn. When his car was against the wall, you could clearly see the amount of rocks and marbles on his front left tire from the pothole. That's just inadmissible in a Formula 1 race, the biggest motorsport spectacle in the world during their most prestigious race. Anyway, Lance's weekend was awful anyways, so he gets a 5. A lot to talk about when it comes to Charles Leclerc's weekend. There's like 4 main incidents, let's just call it that way. The first one, and in my opinion, the only one truly in his control, and where he undoubtedly made a mistake, was the first attempted lap during Q3, went wide at Massanet, which meant he only had one opportunity to change tires and try get pole. In my opinion, he had the fastest car in qualifying, meaning he could have won the race if he got pole. But thanks to that mistake, he basically had to do one of those all or nothing kind of laps. And the result was, well, nothing. But I think he had to try. He had to go for that all or nothing lap. He needed to go all out during that lap with you soft if he wanted the pole. That's just how I like drivers, risking it all for the win rather than settling for any other spot. So I'll give him a pass here personally. Then it's his team stopping him behind a Hamilton who needed to serve a 5-second penalty, which is just infuriating for Leclerc. But I guess Ferrari didn't really have many options either. It was a damn if you do, damn if you don't kind of situation, especially taking into account the amount of people being penalized for the pit lane infringements, which in my opinion weren't really fair. And then it's his crash at the same turn as a Stroll. So the pothole is partially to blame as well. But the key factor was 3 out of his 4 Brembo brakes not working properly, dropping out of the correct operating window during the safety car. I mean, you cannot even see lockup marks during his crash. If something can go wrong for Leclerc around Monaco, there's a high chance it will go wrong. Overall, taking into account my stance on every incident, I'll give him a 7. And the last driver not to finish the race was Carlos Sainz. Pretty even with his teammate during qualifying, and in the race it looked like they would both score points. That's when Nico Hülkenberg tapped him at the hairpin, and then Franco Colapinto sent him against the barriers at Poitiers, ending the Spaniard's race. Overall, I think it was a good one until he retired, and I actually think I underestimated how fast the Williams actually were during my Canada review. Sainz gets a 7. Incredible lap to get out of Q1, by the way. Sergio Pérez ended up P10, but a post-race penalty demoted him to P15. Last of the drivers to finish the race. So close to getting Cadillac's first point ever, but seems like parking in tight spaces just ain't his thing. In the first start, he parked in Bortoleto's spot, since the Brazilian started from the pit lane, and on the second one he was too far ahead. A shame, because he had managed to overtake Fernando Alonso during the restart to put himself in 10th position. I'll give him 7 points. It was an honorable attempt at getting points with a Cadillac, but he should have parked better. Don't know if he'll get another chance like this. Franco Colapinto was 2 tenths slower than Gasly in Q2, which meant he couldn't get into Q3 this time around. The traffic didn't help the Argentinian. Seems like Alpine always has one of the drivers competing for a top midfield spot while the other is further down the field. This time around, Colapinto wasn't the fastest between the two. The team decided to beat him on lap 31, but as we'll see later on, going gambling in the streets of Monaco during this weekend was the way to go. I'll give him a 6. His teammate was significantly ahead of him. Nico Hülkenberg crossed the line in P9, but thanks to a 10-second penalty, which will become a much more common occurrence from now onwards, dropped to P13. He was handed that penalty due to his touch with Sainz at the hairpin after the post-red flag restart, which I think is just a bit unfair. He was being a bit optimistic with the move, but you gotta be optimistic around Monaco to try an overtake, and Carlos Sainz probably could have just stayed wide and come out on top anyway. I give him a 6. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong for George Russell, but in my opinion, being closer to his teammate Antonelli in qualifying would have solved a bunch of his problems. As proven by his teammate, he had a car capable of dominating the Grand Prix, but instead he qualified 4 tenths behind him in P6. Starting in that position, he never really stood a chance. Things got even worse when he was given a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane, which happened a lot, and basically due to the same reason for everyone. With Cadillac as the 11th box, one more than usual on the already cramped Monaco pit lane, driver had to go further around a wide line at the end, but a lot of them just cut it, making the sensors trigger as an, on average, speed infringement. When Russell pitted under the safety car, kinda out of the blue, the pit crew forgot to serve it, and you're not allowed to pit and not serve a penalty. So after the red flag, he was penalized with a drive-through, which ruined the chance of even getting points out in Monaco. A disastrous weekend for Russell, who ain't even second in the championship anymore. He gets a 4. Gabriel Bortoleto flew too close to the sun during qualifying and broke his suspension against the wall during Q1, which meant he couldn't take part of a Q2 he had already qualified for. During his installation lap, he suffered yet another Audi reliability issue, forcing him to start from the pit lane, and just by staying on track, not crashing, and avoiding penalties, managed to get a P11, which, if you consider he was starting from the pit lane, is actually kinda impressive, a 7.5 for him. You might have been wondering where Alonso was. Well, Aston Martin was nowhere during qualifying, but Fernando Alonso always gets the most out of the machinery he is given, and everyone else's mistakes. Today it was more about the second part. He managed to overtake both Bearman and Bottas during the start, and from that point onwards he just stayed out of trouble. It was like one of those Luigi wins by doing nothing videos. I'm giving him a 9, because not making any mistakes around Monaco is harder than it looks. Don't believe me? Just look at the DNF list on all the penalties. Esteban Ocon had almost the same race as Alonso, the only difference being he started further up the field and he's not driving an Aston Martin. Managed to undercut Colapinto, but at the red flag restart got overtaken by Hülkenberg. When the German was penalized, Ocon just inherited that place back. I'd say it's an 8 for him. Alex Albon, just as Carlos did, played the team game for a good part of the race. One of them holds up the cars behind, since it's impossible to overtake around Monaco, so the other can stop freely. It's basically haram racing strategies only truly available at Monaco, but Arvid Lindblad managed to slip through his defense. Still, it was a good race and the strategy would have allowed both Williams to score points if it wasn't for Carlos' incident at the end. I'll give him an 8. Heartbreaking ending for Pierre Gasly. He was the best of the rest during quali and he actually crossed the line in P3 and even started celebrating the podium. He just had forgotten about the 10-second penalty which dropped him to P7. He got past Norris and Verstappen's cars at the start and inherited the places of people in front as they served penalties or crashed into the wall, but he was given 2 5-second penalties due to speeding in the pit lane. I've already explained the reason everyone on the model were getting penalties on the pit lane, kinda nonsensical to be honest, and the team has requested the right of review due to his lost podium, but I feel it'll go nowhere. I'm giving him a 9. Alright, hear me out on this one, hear me out. Arvid Lindblad was behind Colapinto until Alpine stopped the Argentinian and Racing Bulls decided to go ultra long, gambling with Lindblad. It ended up paying off, but it was basically due to the team having luck, so I'm not gonna give him a higher rating just because his team got lucky. It's not even as if he needed a good outlap or in-lap, they literally just had a free stop. I'll give him the same score as Colapinto, even with him being able to get past Albon, because he was almost 8 tenths slower than Lawson, so a 6 it is. Liam Lawson, on the other hand, was one of the drivers of the day. Everyone was, and I'll say still is, saying his seat is going to be taken by Nicolas Solov at the end of this season, and it might, but with performances like this, he'll be on the radar of a few teams and will make the decision to put Solov in his car much more difficult. He benefited from the Williams game, which allowed him to get a free stop since Racing Bulls decided to stay on track for as long as possible, but unlike Lindblad, he was ahead of everyone due to his own merit, his own pace during qualifying, which allowed him to start the Grand Prix in 10th position. I'll give him a 9.5. The only reason he doesn't get a 10 is that Gasly snatched best of the rest pole away from him. Oscar Piastri got a decent result for McLaren when pace-wise they were nowhere near this position, almost managing to get a podium if the penalty for Hadjar had materialized, one of the most uneventful races of the Grand Prix, but hey, he still was part of the cars penalized due to the pit lane issues, but unlike George, he did serve it when stopping. I'm giving him an 8. Why does it have to be so difficult? Were the words Isack Hadjar said after crossing the line to take his first podium for Red Bull in Formula 1. Remember, he's had some previous trauma around Monaco in Formula 2, but this time it all went well for Hadjar, who was suffering with the power delivery all throughout the race, but managed to keep everyone behind and gain Leclerc's and Verstappen's positions. Since he was starting on P5, that meant he moved to P3. And the investigation to an alleged red flag infringement turning out in his favor means he keeps his podium. Hadjar gets to share a podium with his childhood hero, Lewis Hamilton, which didn't seem like the fastest Ferrari around Monaco, at least when it came to a one-lap pace, but he was the one who kept it out of the wall. So fair play to him. That's the most important thing around Monaco. He basically just had to bring the car home, which is easier said than done. As I've mentioned before, he received a 5-second penalty for spinning in the pit lane, which Ferrari basically decided to force Leclerc to take as well, and come out behind Hamilton when he could have been in front. Ferrari were put in a tricky position, but them deciding to make Charles Leclerc sink even deeper into depression has nothing to do with the merit Hamilton has for his race, so he gets an 8.5. And we get to our winner, Kimi Antonelli. Without the safety car and the red flag, he would have loved everyone but the Ferraris. Pole, fastest lap, and victory, leading every lap to complete the Grand Chelem, nailing both stars. This kid is just something else, mate. Obviously, the car plays a big factor, but George Russell, the guy who was comfortably beating Lewis Hamilton last season and who won the F2 title over Lando Norris, current world champion, ain't even close to him with the same car. So I cannot give him anything lower than a 10. Perfect score, perfect race. I almost cannot believe what's happening this season. Antonelli is setting the pace, 5 wins in a row for him, winning even in a circuit where Mercedes weren't the favorites. He's rewriting history books as we speak, and it seems like George Russell or any other driver, to be honest, will have troubles catching him next time in Spain. See you all there. And that's all for today. Thank you for watching the video. Let me know what you think about it in the comments down below, and you can also follow me on my social media. Until next time.